There's a reason you can spend hours doing things that don't move your life forward, but struggle to stay focused on what could change everything. It's not lack of discipline. It's not lack of time. And it's definitely not lack of potential. It's something deeper, because your mind has been trained to work against you, trained to seek comfort instead of growth, trained to escape instead of build, trained to choose what feels good now over what creates your future. And until you understand this, you will keep repeating the same cycle, starting strong, then stopping, feeling motivated, then losing direction, deciding to change, then going back to the same habits, not because you're weak, but because your brain is following a pattern you didn't even realize you created. And here's the truth most people never face. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your patterns. So if your patterns are built on distraction, avoidance, and instant gratification, your life will reflect that. But here's the part that changes everything. That same mind that has been holding you back can be retrained. You can rewire what you desire. You can change what you naturally move toward. You can train your brain to crave discipline, focus, and execution. Not through motivation, not through force, but through understanding and repetition. And once that shift happens, you stop fighting yourself. You stop depending on willpower, and you start becoming the type of person who naturally does what needs to be done. This is not about trying harder. This is about becoming different. And once you understand how this works, you'll never look at your lack of consistency the same way again. Before we move forward, I want to invite you to do something simple but meaningful. If this kind of message resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every video is designed to strengthen your mind, expand your awareness, and help you build a life with more clarity, direction, and purpose. And I'd like you to leave a comment with this sentence: "My mind is ready for a new level." Write it with intention, because many times, transformation begins in the exact moment you decide to show up differently in your own life. Now let's move forward. Now that you're still here, there's something you need to understand at a deeper level. Your mind is not broken. You are not weak, and you are definitely not incapable. But there is a problem. Your mind has been trained to operate against the life you say you want to build. From the moment you wake up, your brain is already making decisions for you, not based on your goals, not based on your future, not based on the person you want to become, but based on patterns. Old patterns, repeated patterns, patterns built over years, without awareness. And here is the shift that changes everything. Your brain is not designed to make you successful. It is designed to save energy and protect you from discomfort. To your brain, studying is not a priority. Discipline is not a priority. Building wealth is not a priority. What it wants is to avoid effort, avoid discomfort, and move toward immediate relief. And this explains a lot. It explains why you know exactly what you need to do, but you don't do it. It explains why you start motivated, but can't sustain it. It explains why you feel stuck, even when you know you have potential, because the problem was never lack of knowledge. The problem is that your mind was conditioned to desire the wrong things. Think about this honestly for a moment. How many times have you felt discomfort and immediately reached for your phone? How many times have you felt anxiety and escaped into distraction? How many times have you avoided something important and chosen something easier just to feel better in the moment? Without realizing it, you trained your brain to follow a dangerous rule: avoid discomfort, seek relief. And that's where the cycle begins. Discomfort appears. You escape. You escape into your phone. You escape into entertainment. You escape into anything that numbs the moment. And every time you do that, you reinforce the pattern. You teach your brain that escaping works, that avoiding is safe, that easy is better, that immediate relief matters more than long-term results. Now do you see what's happening? You're not lacking discipline. You've been trained not to sustain discipline. And the more you repeat this cycle, the stronger it becomes. Because the brain learns through repetition. It doesn't learn from what you want. It learns from what you do consistently. If you repeat distraction, it learns distraction. If you repeat procrastination, it learns procrastination. If you repeat avoidance, it learns avoidance. And over time, it becomes automatic. You're no longer deciding. You're reacting. That's why so many people spend years stuck in the same patterns. Not because they don't want to change, but because they're trying to change behavior without changing the conditioning behind it. And here's something almost no one tells you. Motivation is not enough. Motivation is unstable. It comes and it goes. It shows up when you feel inspired and disappears when you need it most. If your life depends on motivation, you will live in cycles. You start strong, you stop halfway, you restart again, and never sustain. Because motivation does not reprogram the mind. Repetition does. Consistency does. Action taken without feeling ready does. Now understand this clearly. Your mind does not change when you understand something. It changes when you repeat something. You can watch videos. You can read books. You can know exactly what needs to be done. But if your daily actions don't change, nothing changes. And this is why so many people feel frustrated. Because they know a lot, but execute very little. And that frustration creates another trap. You start believing the problem is you, that you lack discipline, that you can't stay consistent, that you always fail. But that's not the truth. That's just the result of a pattern repeated enough times to feel like your identity. And here is a critical shift. You are not your pattern. You are just operating inside a pattern. And anything that was trained can be retrained. But there is a price, and that price is discomfort. Because every time you try to change, your brain reacts. It resists. It creates excuses. It generates fatigue. It tries to pull you back, not because you can't do it, but because you are stepping out of the automatic. And the brain hates leaving the automatic. It prefers what is familiar, even if what is familiar is destroying your life. So when you feel resistance, that does not mean you are on the wrong path. It means you are finally trying to break the pattern that has been holding you back. And this is where most people quit, because they interpret discomfort as incapability, when in reality, it is a signal of change. If you truly understand this, everything begins to shift. You stop blaming yourself and start taking control. You stop waiting for motivation and start acting with direction. You stop avoiding discomfort and start using it as a tool. Because from this point forward, you are not just trying to be more disciplined. You are reprogramming your mind. And in the next part, you're going to understand exactly how your brain decides what you desire and what you avoid. And once you see this clearly, you will never look at your lack of action the same way again. Now, pay very close attention to what I'm about to show you, because this can completely change the way you understand your own mind. There is a system inside your brain that decides what you want to do and what you avoid. And this system is not based on logic. It's not based on what's right. And it's definitely not based on what's best for your future. It operates based on one thing: reward. Your brain is constantly asking a silent question. What gives me the most reward right now? And based on that answer, it directs your behavior. Now here's something most people misunderstand. Dopamine is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of desire, of anticipation, of wanting to act, which means Dopamine doesn't make you feel good after you do something. It makes you want to do it again. And that changes everything, because your brain is not trying to make you happy. It's trying to make you repeat. Anything that releases dopamine, your brain marks as important. And anything that doesn't, it starts to avoid. Now look at the world you're living in. A world filled with reward. Fast, easy, constant. Your phone, social media, short videos, processed food, endless entertainment. All of it is designed to release dopamine instantly, without effort, without delay, without building anything. So what happens when you consume this every day? You train your brain. You teach your brain that reward should be instant, pleasure should be easy, and effort is not worth it. Now think about the impact of that. When you sit down to study, there is no immediate dopamine. When you start working on something meaningful, there is no instant reward. When you try to build discipline, there is no quick pleasure at the beginning. So what does your brain do? It rejects it. It creates resistance. It generates boredom. It pulls you toward something easier, not because you're weak, but because your brain was conditioned to operate like this. And here is the most dangerous part. Your brain does not distinguish between what is good for you and what is destroying you. It doesn't know what leads to success and what keeps you stuck. It only knows one thing. Does this release dopamine? If yes, repeat. That's why so many people feel trapped in cycles. They want to change, but can't sustain it. They start, but stop. They decide, but return to the same patterns, because their brain is addicted to easy reward. And the more you feed it that, the harder it becomes to do what actually matters. It's like you're training your brain to lose interest in your own growth. Now let me ask you something directly. What have you been teaching your brain to desire? Because everything you repeat becomes a pattern, and every pattern becomes an automatic impulse. If every time you feel discomfort, you reach for your phone, your brain learns that the phone solves discomfort. If every time you feel anxiety, you escape into distraction, your brain learns that avoidance is the solution. If every time something requires effort, you avoid it, your brain learns that effort is a threat. And this creates what we can call mental shortcuts, fast pathways. Your brain follows without thinking. And the more you use them, the stronger they become, until one day you're no longer choosing, you're reacting. Now you begin to understand why change feels so difficult. Because you're not just trying to change a habit, you're trying to compete with an entire system that has been reinforced for years. But here's the most important part, and maybe the most powerful shift in this video. This same system can be reprogrammed. The dopamine that is trapping you today can also be used to set you free. The same mechanism that made you crave what is easy can make you desire what is hard. But that requires a conscious shift, because from this point forward, you can no longer operate on autopilot. You have to start teaching your brain what is actually worth pursuing. And this doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with motivation. It doesn't happen with intention alone. It happens through conscious repetition, through strategy, and most importantly, through your ability to tolerate discomfort. Because in the beginning, your brain will resist. It won't want it. It will push back. But if you persist, it learns. And once it learns, everything changes. Because there comes a point where what once felt difficult starts to generate desire. And that is exactly what we're going to build next. In the next part, you're going to understand how to train your brain to associate reward with what truly matters. And once that happens, discipline stops being a constant struggle and starts becoming part of who you are. Now that you understand how your brain has been conditioned and why it desires what holds you back, the question changes. It's no longer, why am I like this? Now it becomes, how do I stop being like this in practice. And here is the direct answer. You don't change your mind with intention. You change your mind with strategic repetition. There is a silent law governing your behavior every single day. You can ignore it, or you can learn to use it. Your brain adapts to what you repeatedly do. This is neuroplasticity. But let's go deeper, because most people only understand this on the surface. Your brain is built for efficiency. It wants to save energy. It wants to automate everything it can. Every time you repeat an action, your brain starts to record it. At the beginning, it's hard. It requires attention. It requires effort. It drains energy. But as you repeat it, your brain begins to automate it. And that's exactly how your current patterns were built. No one wakes up one day being a procrastinator. No one is born without discipline. No one is naturally addicted to distraction. All of that was trained, repeated, reinforced over time. Now let me show you something even more powerful. Every action you repeat doesn't just reinforce behavior. It builds identity. When you procrastinate every day, you're not just delaying tasks. You are training your brain to believe that you are the type of person who delays when you avoid discomfort. You're not just escaping a difficult moment. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who cannot sustain pressure. And here is one of the most powerful shifts in this entire video. You don't change your life by changing goals. You change your life by changing identity. And identity is built through repetition. Now let's go even deeper. There are two types of repetition: automatic repetition and conscious repetition. Automatic repetition is what most people live in, without awareness, without decision, without questioning. You grab your phone. Without thinking, you avoid tasks. Without noticing, you procrastinate, almost like a reflex. That is programming running. Now there is conscious repetition. This is different. It requires presence. It requires decision. It requires effort. It's when you notice the impulse, can choose to act differently. And this is the exact moment your brain begins to change. Because every time you interrupt the old pattern and execute a new behavior, even if it's hard, even if there's resistance, even if you don't feel like it, you are building a new neural pathway. Now let me be very direct with you. At the beginning, it will feel uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. You will feel resistance. You will feel laziness. You will feel like stopping. You will feel like it's not working. And this is where most people quit, because they interpret discomfort as a sign that something is wrong. But it's not. That discomfort is the process. It is your brain trying to protect the old pattern. It is your old system fighting to survive. And if you give in, it wins. But if you hold, even for a few minutes, even if it's imperfect, even if it's small, you win. And every small victory like this weakens the old pattern and strengthens the new one. Now let's go even deeper. Your brain doesn't change with repetition alone. It changes with repetition plus emotion. If you do something difficult, but interpret it as suffering, your brain will reject it. But if you do something difficult and consciously interpret it as growth, as progress, as evolution, your brain begins to accept it. And this accelerates the process. That's why it's critical to recognize small wins, not as something superficial, but as neural reinforcement. Finished a task? Acknowledge it. Stayed consistent? Acknowledge it. Resisted the impulse? Acknowledge it. It can be a thought. It can be a word. It can be a small gesture. But it must exist, because this teaches your brain to release dopamine in the right direction. Now let's talk strategy. If you want to reprogram your mind, you have to stop trying to change everything at once. That doesn't work. It never worked. Your brain goes into overload. It goes into defense. And it pulls you back to the old pattern. So you need to play this the right way. You choose one area, just one. It can be study, training, work, organization, any area that truly matters to you, and you create one rule. Every day, same time, no negotiation. Now here is the most important detail. You start small, ridiculously small. So small that excuses don't survive. 2 minutes, 5 minutes. One simple action, and you repeat it every single day. No exceptions, because at this stage, it's not about performance. It's about building a pattern, and patterns come from consistency. Now imagine this over days, then weeks, then months. What once required effort starts requiring less energy. What once felt difficult starts feeling more natural. What you used to avoid, you begin to tolerate. And eventually, you begin to desire it. That is how the mind changes. Now let me give you a more strategic view. There are 3 phases in reprogramming your mind. Phase 1, resistance. Everything feels hard. Your brain rejects it. You have to force yourself. Phase 2, adaptation. Resistance decreases. The habit starts forming. Still requires effort, but less. Phase 3, automation. The behavior becomes a pattern. You act with less friction, and it begins to feel natural. Most people never reach phase 3 because they quit in phase 1. Now you understand why you struggled before. It was never lack of ability. It was interruption of the process. Now hold on to this. You don't need to feel ready. You need to move through resistance. And if you do that, with consistency, with awareness, with repetition, your brain will adapt. And when it adapts, you change, not just in behavior, but in how you think, how you act, how you see yourself. Now let's address a critical mistake. The biggest error people make is negotiating with their impulses. Not today. I'll do it tomorrow. Just this once. These seem small, but they destroy the process. Because every time you negotiate, you weaken the new pattern and strengthen the old one. You need to create an internal rule. I do it, regardless of how I feel. It can be small. It can be imperfect, but it gets done. Because what you are building here is not a result. It's identity. And identity is not built through perfection. It is built through repetition. Now, before we move forward, understand this clearly. You don't need to trust your motivation. You need to trust your system. A system is what you do, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're tired, even when you're not inspired. And when you build a system, your life begins to move out of chaos and into direction. And that is freedom, because now you are no longer reacting to your mind. You are training it. And in the next part, you're going to learn how to accelerate this process by using reward the right way and eliminating the hidden traps that keep pulling you back, because it's not enough to build the new. You also have to stop feeding the old. And when you understand this, discipline stops being a burden and becomes the clearest path to freedom. Now, this is where everything starts to become real, because understanding your brain is powerful, but learning how to use it, that's what changes your life. At this point, you already know something most people ignore. Your brain follows reward. It moves toward what gives dopamine and avoids what doesn't. So the real question is, how do you make your brain start craving what actually builds your future? And the answer is not force, it's strategy. You don't fight your brain, you train it. And to do that, you need to do 2 things at the same time. You reduce the wrong sources of dopamine, and you reinforce the right ones. If you only try to build discipline, but keep feeding distraction, you lose. Because your brain will always choose what feels easier. So the first move is this. You need to start cutting easy dopamine. Not completely, not in an extreme way, but intentionally. Because right now, most people are overstimulated. Their brain is flooded with fast reward, scrolling, short videos, constant notifications, instant entertainment. And when your brain gets used to that level of stimulation, everything else feels boring. Reading feels slow. Studying feels heavy. Working feels exhausting. Not because those things are bad, but because your brain is used to speed. It's like trying to enjoy silence after being in noise all day. So you need to reset that baseline. And this is where most people fail, because they try to add discipline without removing distraction. And that doesn't work. You cannot build focus on top of constant stimulation. So here's a simple rule. Before you consume, you create. Before you scroll, you act. Before you distract yourself, you execute something that matters. This one shift alone can change your entire day, because now your brain starts associating effort as the entry point to reward. Now let's go deeper. The second move is this. You need to reward the right behavior, but not in the way most people think, not with external rewards, not with food, not with distractions, not with treating yourself in a way that pulls you backward. You need to build internal reward, and this is subtle, but extremely powerful. Every time you complete something difficult, you pause, even if it's small, and you recognize it. I did it. I showed up. I moved forward. This might sound simple, but it is not small, because in that moment, your brain releases dopamine, and now it starts linking effort with reward. Over time, your brain begins to anticipate that feeling, and that's when something shifts. You no longer need to force yourself as much, because the brain starts helping you. It starts wanting the action. Now here's where we accelerate this even more. You combine effort with something you already enjoy. This is called association. If you like music, use music while training. If you enjoy a certain environment, use it for focused work. If you like coffee, pair it with study or execution. What you are doing here is transferring pleasure from something easy to something meaningful. And your brain doesn't resist that. It adapts to it. Now let's talk about something most people ignore. Delay. Your brain has been trained to expect immediate reward, so you need to reverse that. You need to create distance between impulse and reward. When you feel the urge to scroll, wait. When you feel the urge to escape, pause, even 30 seconds, even 1 minute, because in that space, you are training your brain to tolerate discomfort. And that changes everything. Because the moment you can tolerate discomfort, you gain control, and control creates power. Now let's go even deeper. There is something called dopamine reset, and this is not about eliminating pleasure. It's about rebalancing sensitivity. When you reduce overstimulation, your brain becomes more sensitive again. And suddenly, simple things start to feel rewarding. Progress feels good. Focus feels good. Completion feels good. And this is when your life starts to shift. Because now, you don't need extreme stimulation anymore. You start finding reward in building. And that is rare. Most people never reach this point because they are constantly feeding the easy path. Now here's a final strategic move for this block. You need to make the wrong behavior harder and the right behavior easier. Your environment matters more than your motivation. If your phone is always near you, you will use it. If distractions are always available, you will fall into them. So you change the structure. Remove what pulls you away. Expose what moves you forward. Leave your tools ready. Prepare your space. Reduce friction. Because your brain will always choose the path of least resistance. So make the right path easier and the wrong path harder. Now step back for a moment. Look at what you're building here. You are not trying to become disciplined through force. You are redesigning your internal system. You are teaching your brain what to want. And once your brain wants the right things, everything changes. Because now, you are no longer fighting yourself. You are aligned. And in the next part, we're going to take this even further. Because it's not just about behavior. It's about identity. Who you believe you are will define what you sustain. And once you shift that, discipline becomes natural, and your results become inevitable. Now, we need to go deeper. Because up to this point, we've been talking about behavior. What you do. What you avoid. What you repeat. But there is something underneath all of that. Something more powerful. Identity. Who you believe you are is shaping everything you do. Not your goals. Not your plans. Not even your intentions. Your identity. Because your brain is always trying to stay consistent with who you think you are. If you see yourself as someone undisciplined, you will act undisciplined. If you see yourself as someone inconsistent, you will break your own patterns. If you see yourself as someone who always starts but never finishes, you will prove that belief again and again. Not consciously, but automatically. Because identity drives behavior. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. Most people are not stuck because they don't know what to do. They are stuck because they are trying to act like someone they don't believe they are. They try to be disciplined while believing they are not. They try to stay consistent while telling themselves they always fail. And this creates conflict, internal resistance, because your brain is trying to protect identity. It will sabotage behavior to preserve what feels familiar, even if what feels familiar is keeping you stuck. That's why people say things like, "I'm just not that type of person. I've always been like this. I can't stay consistent." And every time they repeat that, they reinforce it because your brain believes what you repeat. And then it acts accordingly. Now here is the shift that changes everything. You don't become disciplined by forcing discipline. You become disciplined by becoming the type of person who does not break their word. That's identity. And identity is not something you declare. It is something you build through evidence. Small evidence, repeated evidence, consistent evidence. Every time you do what you said you would do, you create proof, and your brain records that proof. I follow through. I execute. I don't quit. And over time, that becomes your identity. Now let's make this practical. You don't need to change everything about yourself. You need to start with one sentence. A new internal statement. Not something unrealistic. Not something fake, but something directional. Instead of saying, "I have no discipline," you say, "I am building discipline." Instead of, "I can't stay consistent," you say, "I am becoming consistent." Instead of, "I always quit," you say, "I am learning to finish what I start." This is not just language. This is programming, because the words you repeat shape the identity you accept, and the identity you accept defines the actions you sustain. Now here's the key. You cannot lie to yourself. If your words are not backed by action, your brain rejects them. So you need alignment. You say it, and then you prove it, even in small ways, very small ways. You said you would do something, you do it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's imperfect, even if it's small. Because every time you follow through, you reinforce identity. Now here is something most people never realize. Your identity is not built in big moments. It's built in small, repeated decisions. The moment you didn't want to start, but you started. The moment you wanted to quit, but you continued. The moment you wanted to escape, but you stayed. Those moments are defining who you are becoming. Now let's go even deeper. There are two identities fighting inside you. The old one, and the one you are trying to build. The old one is familiar. It is comfortable. It is predictable. The new one feels unnatural. It feels difficult. It feels uncertain. And your brain will always try to pull you back to the old one, because the old one is safe, even if it's limiting. So every time you choose growth, you are stepping into a new identity. And that requires something most people avoid, letting go of who you've been, because you cannot become someone new while holding on to the old version of yourself. And that's not easy, because identity is emotional. It's tied to your past, to your experiences, to your story. But here's the truth. Your past explains you, but it does not define you. You are not obligated to stay the same person you were yesterday. You are allowed to evolve. And more than that, you are responsible for it. Now, here's the final shift of this block. Stop asking, what do I feel like doing? Start asking, what would the person I'm becoming do right now? That question changes everything, because now you are no longer acting from impulse. You are acting from identity, and identity creates consistency. So instead of chasing motivation, you become someone who executes. Instead of waiting for the right moment, you become someone who acts. Instead of hoping things change, you become the one who creates change. And that is power, because once identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. And once behavior becomes consistent, results become inevitable. In the next part, we're going to bring everything together, because you don't just need to understand. You need a system you can follow daily, a structure that removes confusion and turns everything you've learned into action, because clarity without execution changes nothing, but clarity applied changes everything. Now, this is where everything becomes real, because understanding your mind means nothing if your life doesn't change after this video ends. Most people watch, they agree, they feel motivated, and then they go back to the same patterns, same habits, same distractions, same results. Not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't apply. So right now, we remove confusion, no complexity, no overload, just a system, a structure you can follow even on your worst days. Because if your system only works when you feel good, it's not a system. It's a temporary state, and temporary states never build permanent change. So here's what you're going to do. Step 1. Choose one area. This is where most people fail. They try to fix everything. Their focus, their body, their finances, their routine, their mindset, and they collapse. Because scattered effort creates weak execution. You need focus. Choose the one area that, if improved, would create the biggest shift in your life. And commit to it, not emotionally, structurally. Step 2. Shrink the action. This is where you stop lying to yourself. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a repeatable action, so small that your brain cannot resist. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, one simple movement. And this is important. You are not building results yet. You are building reliability. Because if you cannot rely on yourself, nothing else matters. Step 3. Lock the time. Same time, every day. No decisions, no thinking, no debate. Because every time you decide again, you create friction. And friction leads to failure. Structure removes friction. Step 4. Eliminate negotiation. This is where identity is built. You don't ask, do I feel like it? You don't check your mood. You follow the rule. Because if you negotiate with your mind will win. It always finds a reason. So you remove the option. You do it, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Because the goal is not performance. The goal is consistency. Step 5. Track your execution. Make it visible. You need proof, not feelings, not thoughts, not intentions. Proof. Mark each day, create a chain, and protect that chain. Because your brain respects progress. And when you see it, you feel it. And when you feel it, you reinforce it. Step 6. Reward the process, not just the outcome. Most people only celebrate when they reach the final result, but the result takes time. So they quit before the reward ever comes. You don't do that. You reward the process. You showed up. That matters. You followed through. That matters. You resisted the impulse. That matters. And you recognize it, because every time you do, you teach your brain, this is worth repeating. Step 7. Control your environment. Your environment is stronger than your intention. If distraction is easy, you will choose distraction. If your phone is always close, you will use it. So you change the setup. Remove what pulls you back. Expose what moves you forward. Make the right action easier. Make the wrong action harder. Because your brain always chooses the path of least resistance. So redesign the path. Step 8. Increase slowly. This is where patience comes in. You don't rush growth. You allow adaptation. Because fast change breaks. But slow change builds something that lasts. Now step back for a moment. Look at what you have now. You understand your mind. You understand your patterns. You understand dopamine. You understand identity. And now you have a system. From this point forward, you are not guessing. You are executing. Now let me tell you something that most people never accept. You will have bad days. Days where you don't feel like doing anything. Days where your mind fights you. Days where everything feels heavy. And those are the days that matter most. Because easy days don't build discipline. Hard days do. So on those days, you don't aim for perfect. You aim for presence. Even if it's 1 minute. Even if it's the smallest version possible. You show up. Because showing up is the foundation of identity. And identity is what sustains everything. Now listen carefully. Your life is not shaped by what you want. It is shaped by what you repeat. So the real question is not, what do I want to change? The real question is, what am I willing to repeat every single day, even when I don't feel like it? Because that answer defines your future. Now I want you to do something. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now, choose your one action. Decide when you will do it. And commit. No emotion. No overthinking. No delay, just decision. Then write this in the comments. I choose discipline over comfort. Write it with intention. Because this is not just a sentence. This is a line in the sand. And from this point forward, every action you take either moves you closer to the person you're becoming or back to the version you're trying to leave behind. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, you're not just consuming content. You are rebuilding your mind. And if you know someone who is stuck in cycles, share this with them. Because sometimes one shift is enough to change everything. Now this is where it begins. No more waiting. No more restarting. No more excuses. Just action. Today. And again tomorrow. And again. Because that is how a new life is built.